Welcome back to We Dream, a podcast by Dream.org, a national nonprofit working to close prison doors and open doors of opportunity into the green economy. Together, we're building a future rooted in freedom, dignity, and opportunity for all. As you know, this season's all about reimagining a justice system that puts people over punishment, and we're covering all things analysis and updates on the crime bill expected from the Trump administration. I'm Naomi Garcia Hector.
And I'm Janos Martin.
This is episode 4, and for our last episode of 2025, we wanted to go big or go home, so we're going to bring you 2 awesome conversations rather than just one. And Janos will introduce our guests, and I think this is a special episode for us because, at Dream, we are all about lived experience and people being able to bring that experience into their work, into their advocacy, into their passion for justice, and our 2 guests definitely do just that. You want to tell us about them?
Absolutely. We're all about lived experience and common ground, which is also a really strong theme of this episode. Our first guest that you're going to hear from right after this, Danean McAndrew, somebody who served time in prison after January 6th, and she's going to share with us some of the unique experiences that brought her to the Capitol that day, into the prison system, and into reforming the system since she's come home. And then later, we're going to hear from Anthony Petty, who is from Washington, D.C., born and raised, and has spent years trying to improve the D.C. criminal justice system after being incarcerated for many years all around the country. You're actually, one of the wildest parts of this episode is he actually lists all the places he's been incarcerated, and it just goes to show how people, especially from D.C., are treated within this criminal justice system.
This is a good one. Let's dive right in.
All right. Now, I'm not happy with the way Twitter has been going for a long time, but the one reason I still like to use it is you never know who you're going to meet there. And I got the chance last year, start interacting with an account that had some really interesting things to say. And now she's here on the podcast. We've gotten to know each other over the last year, and want to welcome Danean McAndrew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us how you wound up in the Dream Justice Cohort, and then we'll go through some of your story.
So I am 57. I'm a SoCal native. I moved away to college for several years. I'm back in my family home, and self-employed for 23 years. No criminal history whatsoever. I went to the Capitol on January 6th to hear Trump speak. I flew out by myself from California. And I heard his speech and then walked to the Capitol, didn't march, really, walked to the Capitol. I went inside the building for 8 minutes to film, and I left when I was asked to leave. 9 months later, the FBI showed up on my doorstep, and I got thrust into the system, charged with 4 nonviolent misdemeanors, and sentenced to federal prison for 3 months. I quickly learned how broken our criminal justice system is, how broken our prison system is, how non-rehabilitative and punitive the prison system is. And I promised the ladies that I was in with that I would try to speak up and tell their stories once I got out. So that's what I did. As soon as I got out, that's how you found me on X, and that's how we started talking. And then the Dream Justice Cohort was coming up. You encouraged me to apply. I was accepted. I graduated, and here I am.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to spend most of the conversation talking about criminal justice reform and your efforts there and everything you've sort of learned along the way. But I don't want to gloss all the way over January 6th itself. Obviously, that day, there were some people that did some pretty heinous things, but then there were also a lot of people like yourself who were just kind of moving with the crowd. And I thought it was interesting to watch as there were such severe prosecutions of some of the people in your category. Is there anything that you think people who generally are not politically aligned with January 6ers misunderstand about January 6th, and before we sort of move on to other stuff?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. And I think that is because of the way it's been portrayed in the news. And the news doesn't cover a story of a kitten unless it's stuck in a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to focus on the thing that's going to keep their viewers tuned in, which is the violence that day. So I do want to say that the Capitol grounds is a big area. So when I got there at 2:33. And I didn't see any barriers up. I didn't see any signs. Those had already been removed. What I saw when I got there was the hill, and it was covered with thousands of people, including officers who were just mingling in the crowd. So I went up and I went to take some video, and then I walked alongside the Capitol police officers and hung out with them for about 20 minutes. And I heard that we were being allowed into the building. So I walked in to open doors with hundreds and hundreds of other people who were charged with misdemeanors like I was. The Capitol police officers, this even came up in my FBI statement of facts, that they were fist bumping the people around me. I didn't perceive any animosity. I didn't see any violence that day. I'm not saying there wasn't violence, but I didn't see any, and I was surprised to hear about it. I had no cell phone reception. Was walking back to my hotel getting texts like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? You're not near the Capitol." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just leaving there." Why? There's violence and mayhem everywhere. And I'm like, "No, there's not. I just looked." So I think there are a couple interesting things that day that people don't understand on who Liam left. Some of these things I get from so the chief of the Capitol Police that day, his name is Stephen's son. He was just interviewed by a friend of mine who was also a defendant. He was saying that typically what happens when someone trespasses into the Capitol is they get 3 warnings, and if they don't leave, then they're given a $50 citation. We didn't get warnings. Also, he was talking about there's this thing called a loud voice, basically a giant PA system for the whole campus, not just the Capitol, right? They used that in the evening of January 6th to tell people that, there was the 6 o'clock curfew, but they never used that while people were coming in and out of the building in front of the fist bumping Capitol police officers. But they could have. So that makes me wonder too. Like, I have a lot of questions that I think people on the left are not asking. Like, why didn't they use the PA system? Why didn't they issue us citations? Why didn't they tell us to leave? Why did they fist bump us instead? Why did they send me to prison?
And, I think people who are on the left, certainly who come out of the activist left, what they are familiar with is law enforcement behaving in ways that are questionable at protests, right? And being arrested and charged at protests. And I think as somebody who believes in the First Amendment and criminal justice reform, my hope would be that people on the right and the left can agree that we should err on the side of respecting nonviolent free expression and not penalizing it, even though it's historically happened a lot on the left. And I think when you look at the number of people who are prosecuted for January 6th, again, outside of the people who committed acts of violence, it definitely felt like it was overbearing in a way that led a lot of people on the right to question the legitimacy of federal prosecutions, which, I think brings us to like our larger conversation around criminal justice reform at the federal level. Thank you for sharing that perspective. The next thing I want to ask you is, you did mention it, but your experience in prison, you're at one of, I think, probably the most horrible women's federal prison facilities in the country. Can you just share a little bit about what happened there? And I mean, presumably this is part of what led to this bond that you have with the other women who were there.
Yeah, so I was housed in FCI Dublin. The prison was shut down last spring because of rampant abuse, corruption, and environmental conditions. So there have been 9 staff members, including the former warden and the former chaplain, also 7 of the corrections officers who have either been found guilty at trial or pled guilty to sexual assault of the female inmates in there. And that was the situation I was housed in. There was a lot of retaliation against not only the ladies who were in there, but the staff who were reporting this. There's a woman named Tess Korth. She was a unit manager. She had been with the BOP for about 30 years. They forced her out because she wouldn't shut up about the rapes that were happening in there. And she's a very interesting listen. And if you could ever find an interview of her, I think you would learn a lot from her perspective. Yeah, there was the water was very bad in there. It made me very, very, very sick for almost 3 months. I served 78 days out of 90. I got out a little early because First Step Act, which was good. Like any day not in prison is a good day.
We're always happy to hear about the First Step Back to help.
Yeah. Thank you for your work on that. So there was black mold, asbestos, chronic understaffing. I was supposed to be taking programming classes to be compliant with First Step Act to get the credits, right? But the classes weren't offered due to the understaffing. But as long as I was signed up for a class, I got the credit for being in the class, even though I wasn't able to take it, which that just desperately needs to be fixed as well. I mean, I used my time in there wisely, but a lot of people just sit around and watch TV and they're being housed. They're not being rehabilitated at all. Our rehabilitative model is radically broken. It's not happening. It's the rare case that it happens.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And, implementing the first step has been a long goal of our organization. I mean, we're very happy it passed and it has helped a lot of people, but it does feel very arbitrary from prison to prison, or even within a prison, who's able to benefit from the opportunities to take classes and to do things that will allow people to reduce their sentences. Of course, the prison that you were at, FCI Dublin, shut down for all the reasons you listed, which really, I mean, most prisons are bad. So to be shut down because you're so bad is really, I mean, you got to be at the top of the heap of worst prisons for the Bureau of Prisons to acknowledge that it was no longer a livable situation. So I appreciate you sharing about what could have only been awful conditions. I know that when one of our early conversations, you mentioned that it was connecting with some of the women who you knew would be in the system for many years longer that inspired you coming out. Can you share a little bit about how you sort of took the experience of connecting with other women in there and turned that into a sense of purpose when you came home?
Yeah, definitely. So they knew that I was in there for a very short time. And they were very curious to hear my story because it was so rare that someone with no criminal history was in for nonviolent misdemeanors, right? So they were very interested in my story. So, especially the ladies who were in there for a long time or doing life sentences. So, they asked me to their table and they asked me to tell them my story. I told them my story and they said, "Oh, no, that's horrible." And I said, "No, what I think is horrible is the abuse that y'all are suffering in here." They're like, wait, you know about that?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, of course I know about that. I did research, before I came in." And they were just so encouraged because when you're in there, you don't really have a good grasp on what the public knows and if
Yeah.
they really know what you're going through. So I promised them that when I got out, I would help amplify their muted voices. And I followed through on that promise and got out and just started talking to anybody in person, my grocery store clerk, my bank teller, shouting all over 3 social media platforms, like, "This is broken, this is happening, this is corrupt, my main message is we need to unify for change. We
Yeah.
need unity. Because if we're just going to be divided and fighting each other right and left, then we're never going to get meaningful change that stays from one administration to the other. I think it is. It's like a human rights problem that everyone should care about, right or left.
Well, I mean, we certainly agree. You're preaching to the choir here. I mean, first of all, every politician from both Democratic and Republican Party, with very few exceptions, can own the problem of mass incarceration together and the conditions of our prison system. It's not as if we have a great system under Democratic leadership or Republican leadership. So it's clearly a bipartisan mess. And the people that are impacted, of course, are from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life. So it really should not be pitched as an ideological issue. And that's why we work so hard to create common ground campaigns that are bipartisan and can bring people together. I now know you, and I give you credit for this. I think it's very brave to post, first of all, as somebody with lived experience, because obviously there's a stigma against people who have been incarcerated, even if it was for a short time. And of course, January 6th is a controversial topic, right? So I think the fact that you're willing to, be open about the fact that that is your experience, that doesn't mean that you support everything that every J6er says or does, but like
Certainly not.
certainly not. I've seen you post that too. But you put yourself out there very publicly. So I want to ask you from those bridge building efforts, what do you think is something that people on the left misunderstand about people on the right? And what's one thing people on the right misunderstand about people on the left from your experiences trying to be a bridge builder in this space?
I think people on the left think that people on the right are trying to destroy our country. I think people on the right think people on the left are trying to destroy our country. I don't think either of those are true. I think that we have way more in common than we do have differences. I think that part of it is that we hear somebody's political affiliation and give them this vast array of assumptions that we place onto them without ever having a conversation. They're a conservative, or they voted for Trump. They stand for everything Trump stands for. They march lockstep with Trump on everything. That is not the case for me or any Trump supporter that I've ever met. I think, people on the right assume people on the left, they want like communism, and it's just all so ridiculous and blown up. Like what you were saying before about the benefit of being on Twitter X,
Yeah.
is that we do have the opportunity to listen to people that we don't agree with. So what I do is I'm about reform, right? I've chosen probably 5 dozen people who are articulate, who are not angry, who are actually fighting for change. I follow them, and I don't agree with them about a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So by following them, I get to not only align with them on our common goal, but I get to understand how they come to their opinions on things that I radically disagree with them. And it's okay that we disagree. Like it's America. It's okay. Like we're supposed to disagree. How will we not? So what I do based on that is I never have to follow my For You feed, right? I just follow the people that I'm following, and I don't look at my For You feed, because that's the algorithm that's feeding us things that are dividing our nation. I do believe it's by design that we're being divided. And I just think that is the best way to escape the algorithm and the division that is being thrust upon us daily.
I think that's really well said, and I agree. Last question then is what are your goals? You're now in the criminal justice movement. Welcome. It was great to see you connect with so many other of our Dream Justice Cohort members during the program and since. What are your goals for? What do you think we need to address first and foremost about our criminal justice system, and how do you hope to stay involved as we move ahead?
So I think me leaning conservative, I have kind of a different calling than somebody who leans left would have. I know for me, I didn't understand how broken the system was. I get a lot of pushback from people on the left on that. Well, you didn't care until you were thrust in. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, I can't. All I can do is go forward, right?
And that's how it works for a lot of people, left, right, or center.
Yeah. So I think for me, I want to educate, especially conservatives, about things like the trial tax. How much longer you're going to get sentenced if you don't take a plea and you fight a trial, which happened to me. The judge in my case said the reason you need to go behind bars is because you didn't accept responsibility, not because of my behavior. It's because I fought at trial. And I was not willing to lie under oath and say that I knowingly did something I didn't do, right? I think that I never understood the trial tax. That's a big part of what I want to educate conservatives on. Prison conditions is another thing for me. Release conditions. My release conditions were ridiculous for a nonviolent first-time offender. I'd been clean for 36 years off drugs. I did drugs as a teenager. I had to do 3 urine tests. Well, and none of my charges had anything to do with drugs. It was such a waste. Like the allocation of resources to supervised release is so inefficient and wrong and unnecessary. And the need for reform. I'm having a lot of success, not only online, getting getting people to listen and maybe rethink things. One of the ways I'm trying to do this is I'm trying to do short stories about the ladies I was in with in order to
Mm.
humanize them. You've probably read a few of them. I think that until conservatives can see the humanity in the people who are behind bars, it's going to be really hard to unite for reform. That's another big thing I'm trying to do. Uh, this week, one of my best friends from prison, we're back in touch now that I'm off supervised release and I can have contact with a felon, right? So she's doing life in there and she's coming up for compassionate release. I got to write her a letter. So she's been a huge encouragement to me. And I've been a big encouragement to her as well. So that's one of the things I'm working on. I'm still trying to make connections. I've got connections with another organization as well as Dream, but y'all made that possible for me. I love that you just welcomed me in, even though we are not the same politically. And I love that you want to unite. And you guys have been such a big morale boost for me because I felt for months and months that I was screaming into an abyss and nobody was hearing me. Then you pop up in my DMs and you're like, hey, good job out there. I'm like, oh my God, somebody's here. It was great.
So someone's always listening, and I'm glad it worked out. Well, you've got a full plate. I'm proud of the work you're doing. Happy to be an ally with you in doing it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Danean. All right, I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Danean. Coming right up, we'll be talking to Anthony Petty about his experience. All right, Anthony, so glad you could join us today. Let's start with talking about the work you do. Can you tell us a little bit about Free Minds and the work that you do in DC?
Free Minds is a book club that workshop that works with individuals that's incarcerated, but also when they return to society, we continue to work with. I work as a peer support at Free Mind, working with the guys that's coming home. Mostly, I work with, I would say, the IRA secular guys who've been away for decades and things of that nature, help them with their transition. One of the things I also had my own organization, Neighbors for Justice, that we work with returning citizens also. We help get them like tech skills, also connect them with the resources they need. For my day job, I work as a credible message, which is individuals who work with justice involved youth. And I also work within Ward 8 as a violent prevention specialist in that area right there.
That's great. I love that you do all that work. I think something that maybe we have to spell out because most people don't know, when somebody is incarcerated who's from DC, they tend to get sent pretty far away, right? If you could sort of paint a picture for people, because it's not like DC has a state prison like other places.
What I would do is I would tell you all the places I've been, and I start from when I first got incarcerated. I was at DC jail. After that, I went to Lawton Maximum Security. From there, I went to Occoquan facility. From Occoquan, I was sent to Pennsylvania Camp Hill facility for like a couple of months. Then from there, I came back to Occoquan facility.
And where's that?
Occoquan is in Virginia. It's part of Lawton, Virginia, that's closed now. So once they closed Lawton, they sent us to different places. So I went to Virginia Beach Regional County Jail. From there, I went to USP Allenwood. I stayed in Hold for 9 months. From there, we went to Ohio. They closed Ohio down. Ohio private prison that we were sent to, they closed that down. Then they sent me to Mason, Tennessee. From Mason, Tennessee, I went to Red Onion facility that's in Virginia, and from there I went to Sussex too. Then after that, they was ready for us in the federal system. So from Sussex too, I went to Lee County, Virginia. I stayed there for like 6-7 years, and I went to McQuarrie USP in Kentucky. From McQuarrie USP, Kentucky, I went to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania USP, and from there I went to Coleman, Florida. And from Coleman, Florida, I went to Florence, Colorado. From Florence, Colorado, I went back to uh, Lewisburg, USP. And from Lewisburg, USP, I went to Big Sandy in USP in Kentucky. And from there, I went back to DC jail before I came home.
That's an insane journey. I can't imagine how tough that is, not only for you, but for loved ones, right? For family members who have to figure out how they're going to get to places like Colorado or Florida or Pennsylvania to visit their families. So really appreciate the work that you do in reentry, because people coming home from that experience, like, it must be very challenging. I mean, all reentry is challenging, but especially when you've been shipped around the country like that with no regard. So thank you for that work. We're going to talk policy in a minute, because you were part of the great group that joined us on the Hill the other day. But before that, I want to talk on a human level. How does it feel as somebody who's so committed to supporting his community in DC and keeping it safe when Congress, be it Republicans or Democrats, use DC as a political punching bag and vote to overturn your policies without any input?
So for me, it's deeply personal. Just to hear Congress review all DC legislation before it even becomes law and can modify it if they want. But for them to come back and do the things that they're doing now is literally like to me, I always say it's a slap in the face to DC residents. Like, we're children that we can't elect our own officials, that we need someone to look over top of us to make sure it happen. And some of the things that they're doing is kind of like setting us back years, whereas though we done worked on so many new legislation that restores citizens' rights, also help with the citizens that we all know that are very retish when it really comes down to it. We understand that a lot of the things that's going on in Congress right now is more so what we would say is an agenda that's being placed upon a lot of people, and they're just falling right through. But as an individual who come from a Washingtonian, who
Hmm.
was born and raised in Washington, D.C., but just the reality is this is 700,000 residents in D.C., whereas
Hmm.
44% of whom are black
Hmm.
and brown. So that's what a problem. And being denied your full right as American citizens, it really hurts us. We're not seen as humans who can also elect for individuals such as city council, our own mayors, our own attorney general. So it is really disheartening for a lot of us. But just to deny the basic dignity of being an American citizen, we pay our taxes, we go in the military,
Hmm.
we do all the things that all the other states do.
Absolutely. And I don't think people from any other state would tolerate if Congress could just override their policies that they'd spent decades working on.
They wasn't. And
Yeah,
like I always explain, even when I'm on the Hill, I explain to them, hey, if you're from, say, Tennessee, and somebody from over in Arkansas come say, you know what, we want to change all these laws and things that you'll put in place, how would you feel?
exactly. Exactly. And especially when we look at some of the reform, and I do want to talk about some of the specific reforms that you've been involved in. DC is a place that's come a long way in the last few decades. For example, the bail reform that was put in there in 1992, that was a period of very high violence in DC. DC's gotten steadily safer since then, right? Recidivism rates have gotten lower. There's more resources going to people. That's all because of the work that organizations like yours are doing in DC. Are there some specific policies that have been messed with by Congress that you specifically want to call out? I mean, the Second Chance Act, I know, was something that is working very well that the House voted to repeal. So, yeah, feel free to name any specifics.
Some of the Pacific policies changing of age as youth as adults from
Mm,
14, from 16 to 14. So that right there, as we all know, is just cruel and unusual. There's no
absolutely.
way that you would want to try a child as a 14-year-old child and place them upon, the predators that we see within some of these institutions that I've been to. I wouldn't want my 14-year-old child around none of them. That right there, just like one of the most harmful things that you can do. Okay, we understand that a lot of youth, they have little things that goes on, but that's the reason why a lot of us guys that come home, we come and we work with the youth, try to change the trajectory of their life, try to help them understand that transition away from the street politics and the codes and conducts that you lived by back then, you can't do that. We're adults now. Just to
Hmm.
see individuals such as us do that, it helps them. So that's one of the most important ones that I always speak about. And just the second chance, just to see guys such as myself and other guys, say James Carpenter, Robert Barton, Mustafa Plummer, Craig Watson. A lot of them guys are out here working in the community, helping if they're not safe past his work, helping making sure kids get to school and back to school without any harm being done to them. Working as credible mess, working with the same justice involved youth, or just working in the community as violent interrupters, trying to stop the violence before it becomes a part of the community. So those type of bills, the bill for the bail, that right there, we all know that DC, as I just said, has 44% black. And out of the 44% black, most of them live in low-income housing projects. So we know if someone get locked up, they don't have the means to help pay a bond and things like that. That's what makes DC so unique, the bond system that we have. And that's another thing that I wanted to speak about, because it's the bill that speaks of the 14-year-olds being charged as adult. I would say it's a big lie in that bill saying that if you're 18 years old, you're charged as adult in DC, which is a lie. When you're not, once you turn 18 years old, you're an adult. You're charged as adult. So that's just one of the things. So it's a lot of the policy that's being put forth, whereas though we know it's not the true DC. We done worked on legislation for years concerning these things, and you're just, we're listening to everyone speak about what's good for DC, but they're never asking the people for DC what's good for them.
Exactly. And, when you talk about young people and raise the age, I mean, that was a whole national effort to stop treating children like adults. I know in New York, where I'm from, we were one of the last states where 16-year-olds were charged as adults. And, we moved the age to 18 back about a decade ago. And the idea that we'd go backwards on this issue, the idea that you'd go down from 16 to 14, no state, as far as I know, in the United States prosecutes 14-year-olds like adults. And yet they want to charge DC kids as adults. It's just incredible to move backwards, especially since we have so much evidence now about young people's brains and
Right.
and I mean, and it's obvious. And 14 or 15-year-olds, like, those are kids.
Exactly. And that's the thing that, just from like the laws, Miller, those laws that Supreme Court saying that, okay, a child is a child. A child don't have the wherewithal to understand the consequences of their actions. So, they react and do things that they regret years later, such as myself. I committed a crime at the age of 16. By the time I was 35 or by the time I was 20 years old, I knew what I did was wrong. And I had to be accountable, but I understood before. So I understand exactly some of the things that's being said. And it's just harmful just to see that, DC residents are not being called upon to help with some of these laws.
We got two more quick questions before I got to let you go. So one is, the reason we're talking about these DC bills is partly because they're unjust, but also because they're really, I think, a preview of what they want to do to the whole country with this Trump crime bill. We were excited to have you and your colleagues from Free Minds on the Hill with us. Do you want to share any reflections from that day and how you think your message was received in some of these Senate Democratic offices?
I think it was received well, but I also know how the pressure comes from within Congress, be the House or the Senate. A lot of pressure comes, but I think everything we spoke about was received well from most of the congressional people that we spoke with. But I also know that it's a lot of work that must continue because we're dealing with an administration that has an agenda that they want to push. One of the things that I know as an individual from Washington, D.C., we're just a test study. That's one of the things we wanted to let all the congressional staffers and individuals know. Like, listen, what's going on in D.C. is just a test study for the whole United States. As we see, the National Guards, they're sending them everywhere. Now ICE is going all these different places. So we just want everyone to understand that DC is the first, but it won't be the last. And I think a lot of the staffers that we spoke to, they got a better understanding of what we're trying to tell them.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my last question, which is for people watching or listening who are generally going to be people who support criminal justice reform. What can they do to support the people of DC?
So one of the things that I always say, if it's possible, they could call on their own legislators to vote against any legislation that's going against DC crime bill and things like that. So they can help make sure that they don't overturn the laws that D.C. residents voted on themselves by their mayors, their city councils, their attorney general. These were things that really help a lot of guys that come home and help. So what we've been doing is going to different college campuses, speaking with people and asking them to reach out to their legislators concerning these things. So I will ask that your audience do the same thing and let them know, like, hands off DC.
Hands off DC. Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anthony.
Thanks for listening. It's Naomi, and I'm back here per usual with our host, Janos. Be sure to check the links in the description to learn more about Free Minds, as well as our two guests for this episode, Anthony and Danean. We're recording this closing on January 5th, 2026. Happy New Year. And for our news segment today, we want to shed light on an unprecedented and historic decision made a couple of weeks back regarding the Bureau of Prisons.
Right. So when Danean was talking about her horrific experience in prison, she was specifically talking about being at FCI Dublin, which is notorious even by American prison standards. And for the last couple of years, it was embroiled in scandal, including the time that Danean was there, because sexual assaults by correction officers against the women incarcerated there were so pervasive that eventually the Bureau of Prisons had to entirely shut the prison down and move the women who were there to different facilities across the country. A number of correction officers and even a warden has been prosecuted for their role in the assaults and the cover-up. And just before we all had our holiday break, the news came out that a $100 million verdict was reached to be paid to the victims and survivors of these assaults. It's unprecedented, like Naomi said, because these kinds of incidents happen at a small scale in probably almost every jail and prison across the United States. But like I said, FCI Dublin was always one of the worst federal facilities, especially for women. And finally, it seems that a court has recognized it. And, just reading about what some of the women, many of the women who are receiving these judgments, by the way, are still incarcerated. A lot of them are going to use the settlements to help pay off their restitutions. And some have talked about starting nonprofits for survivors of sexual assault. So it really is a historic settlement to address some of the terrible conditions that you heard about on this episode.
When I read up about it, it looks like it's the largest settlement in BOP history, so definitely notable. If you haven't already, join our National Crime Bill response team by signing up at the link in our description. We'll keep you in the loop on any happenings with this so-called crime bill, especially now that we're in the new year. We expect in the coming weeks or months for there to be movement for us to know more, and we'll keep you in the loop, absolutely. But that's all for now. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to the new year, and remember, don't quit your daydream.